One lost his fingers, another his jaw. The rest lost what was most precious, pride. The wounds to honor cut deeper than blood. The dawn stretched pale across the plains of Jurai, wind combing through brittle grass that whispered like dry paper. Black raider ships squatted on the horizon, their hulls gleaming in the newborn light, banners etched with symbols of conquest. The raiders moved with the arrogance of predators who had never known prey that fought back. They laughed when the crate rattled. One kicked it, the sound of metal against armor ringing sharp in the morning air. Just an animal, they thought. A specimen to cage, to sell, to boast over. Then the lock gave way with a splintering crack. The blur that tore out of the crate was small enough to fit in a soldier's arms, yet fast enough to leave them clutching wounds before their laughter had fully died. Claws raked metal greaves. Teeth sank into flesh with terrifying certainty. One raider screamed as fingers were severed. Another collapsed, jaw mangled in the cub's bite. The others staggered back, their fear unspoken, their pride fractured. They had not been bested by warriors or armies, but by something they deemed insignificant. That humiliation cut deeper than steel. On the ridge above, Ryder Cole stood with his rifle slung low, the leather strap gnawed by years of use. 40 years had carved trenches into his face, scars upon his knuckles, and silence into his manner. He looked like a man who had endured too much and laughed too little, but the faint twitch at the corner of his mouth betrayed amusement as he watched the chaos below. "They think it's an animal," he said, voice gravel dragged across steel. Dr. Lyra Vane stood beside him, hands braced on her satchel, the lenses of her glasses catching the violet gleam of morning. 35, sharp-eyed, sharper-minded, she carried the weight of a scientist who still believed in reason even as the universe unraveled around her. Where Ryder carried war, she carried questions. She didn't blink as the cub sank its teeth into another raider's thigh. "They're wrong," she replied softly, more to herself than to him. Her words hung in the air, clinical and reverent. The cub crouched in the grass, eyes burning with stubborn defiance. Too small to be called a threat, too savage to be ignored. Its growl vibrated like a storm bottled in fur, each movement reckless and furious, every strike carved from instinct. Lyra's chest tightened with recognition. This creature did not fight to win. It fought because surrender was not written in its bones. Below, a thunderous voice split the plain. HFY Drail emerged, armor blacker than the hulls, his frame towering, every gesture soaked in superiority. Pride radiated from him like heat from the desert. His soldiers stiffened as he raised one clawed hand. "Capture it, break its body, and find the humans who dare walk with it." His contempt was thick enough to choke on. To him, humans were insects who spoke too loudly. Ryder's jaw hardened. He had seen that brand of arrogance before, officers drunk on power, blinded by their own reflection. He knew pride was both sword and weakness. His fingers tapped the rifle's grip in rhythm, the habit of a soldier measuring time by breath. The cub, later to be christened Rascal in Lyra's quiet thoughts, lunged again. The raiders faltered, shouting, their formation broken by something impossibly small. One tripped, another swung too wide, another shrieked in disbelief. The little beast didn't win with strength, but with the audacity to refuse defeat. At the edge of the field, another figure lingered, cloak frayed, body tall and thin, eyes shifting like a trader forever measuring profit against peril. Sunvarlo. His hands worried the beads strung at his neck, his gaze torn between the humans on the ridge and the commander below. Survival whispered one choice, guilt whispered another. His loyalty was fog, changing shape with each breath. Ryder's stare cut to him, unblinking. He recognized hesitation for the danger it was. A raider below recovered faster than the rest. Blade raised, he charged the cub. Rascal snarled, but this time it was outmatched. Steel arced downward. Ryder fired. The crack split dawn. The raider fell mid-stride, throat core by the bullet. Dust settled on silence, broken only by the hiss of HFY's fury. "Find them. Burn the ridge." The command struck like a whip. Lyra's hand clutched Ryder's sleeve, pulling him down into cover. Her eyes, wide but steady, reflected not fear but calculation. She studied him as she might a specimen, A man who had no reason left to fight, yet always did. That mystery pulled her harder than any data. The cub darted up the incline, blood dripping from its jaws. It stopped at Ryder's boots and sank teeth into the leather strap of his rifle, tugging as though to claim him. He glanced down, brow lifting. "You bite me again, I'm filing a complaint." Rascal growled, chewing harder. Something like a smirk ghosted across Ryder's face. Lyra pressed a trembling hand to her notebook, muttering words she didn't realize she spoke aloud. Humiliation as a weapon. It's not their wounds that terrify them. It's being made to look weak. Below, the raiders struggled to regain control. Their commander's voice cracked with rage, pride bleeding more openly than the wounds. And in that floundering, in that desperation to salvage dignity, Ryder saw what no strategy could teach. They were already breaking. Sen edged closer to the ridge, his face etched with war between cowardice and conscience. His calm bead flickered with unspoken betrayal, but his eyes locked on Ryder's stillness, on Lyra's unwavering calm, on the cub's relentless defiance. For the first time in his life, doubt seemed heavier than profit. The raiders moved in unison, blades gleaming, voices raised. Dust churned under their boots as they charged. The ground shook with the promise of slaughter. Rascal bolted first, a streak of fury, claws flashing, teeth sinking into the throat of the front raider. Armor clattered, blood sprayed, and panic rippled through their ranks. For one impossible heartbeat, disbelief froze them. That was all Ryder needed. He rose, rifle braced, firing with the economy of a soldier who had long ago stripped fighting of glamour. Beside him, Lyra hurled smoke charges, turning the ridge into a shifting wall of shadow. The cub tore through ankles and throats, fearless. Man, scientist, and beast moved in rhythm not rehearsed but born of necessity. When the dust thinned, 3 raiders lay broken, their armor cracked, their pride shattered. The survivors dragged their wounded back, stumbling, retreating into the arms of their commander's rage. HFY glared up at the ridge, voice trembling with venom. "This is not over." Ryder steadied his rifle on his shoulder, breath calm, hard iron. He knew it wasn't over. But as Rascal curled at his boots and Lyra's gaze caught his, he felt something more dangerous than despair rise in his chest. Hope, sharp as a blade. And you, watching this unfold, remember, the universe does not bow to size, nor to power, nor to crowns of arrogance. It bends to persistence, to the unbroken spirit that endures humiliation and keeps walking. Even the smallest creature, armed with nothing but refusal, can unmake empires. The dust of retreat had not yet settled when the silence returned to the ridge. Smoke coiled between blades of grass, drifting into the pale sky, carrying the tang of burned powder and blood. Ryder Cole lowered his rifle with deliberate care, as though the weapon might shatter if he trusted it too quickly. At his boots, the cub gnawed stubbornly on the rifle strap, as if claiming a share in the fight just ended. Dr. Lyra Vane crouched a few feet away, jotting hurried notes even as her eyes flicked between the beast and the horizon. It was her way of holding chaos still, trap it in words, measure it, render it into something knowable. "You realize what this means," she murmured, voice sharp as a scalpel. Ryder wiped grit from his brow, his silence as practiced as his aim. "It means," she pressed, "they won't stop. Humiliation demands correction. HFY Drail won't retreat twice." The cub growled low, as if punctuating her certainty. Ryder studied the little beast, blood-matted fur, eyes burning with the same reckless defiance he once carried in battlefields he was never meant to survive. He had long since buried the man who thought pride worth dying for. Yet in that moment he saw something dangerous, a reflection. Son Varlo crept closer, cloak clutched tight, his angular face pale beneath the morning light. He kept his hands visible, fingers twitching with the nervous energy of a trader caught between bargains. "You've done it now," he hissed, voice brittle. "They'll hunt you to the edges of this world. And me, if I'm fool enough to stay here." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "You stayed this long." "Observation," he countered quickly, "not loyalty." His gaze darted between rifle, cub, and woman. "Try to calculate value." Yet beneath the excuses, a fracture widened. Profit was no longer the only weight on his scales. Ryder finally spoke, his tone like gravel dragged across steel. If you're leaving, leave. If you're staying, pick a side. Hesitation's just another word for cowardice. Sun flinched, and for a breath his eyes burned with something close to shame. Then he looked away, muttering, "I'll decide soon enough." The wind rose, carrying a distant sound, the steady beat of engines. Raider transports, regrouping. Lyra snapped her notebook shut and adjusted the strap of her satchel. "We can't stay exposed. They'll sweep the plain before midday. There's cover in the canyons. If we move quickly." Ryder was already moving, boots crunching over dry stone. He had no map, no compass, but his stride carried the certainty of men who had lived long enough to trust instinct over instruments. Lyra followed, the cub bounding between them, its movements erratic yet determined, as though afraid of being left behind. Sun trailed last, shoulders hunched, muttering curses in 3 languages. The descent into the canyons was steep. Red walls rose around them, fractured by time, etched with scars of ancient rivers. Shadows clung to the stone, offering concealment but little comfort. Every echo carried suspicion, every gust of wind a reminder that pursuit was inevitable. Hours passed beneath the heavy silence. Ryder moved with the economy of someone who had spent decades conserving energy, his eyes scanning ridgelines, his rifle always within reach. Lyra's breathing grew ragged, but her gaze never wavered from the cub, who trudged stubbornly despite its small frame. She scribbled notes even while walking, capturing each twitch of its ears, each flare of its nostrils. "You're studying it like a specimen," Ryder said at last. She glanced at him, startled by his voice. "I'm studying it like a survivor. There's a difference." Ryder let the silence close again, but her words lingered. Survivor. It was a title he wore without pride, but without denial. By dusk, they reached a hollow carve into the canyon wall, a shallow refuge with enough space for a fireless camp. Sun collapsed first, muttering complaints, though he quickly quieted when Ryder's eyes fixed on him. Lyra sank to the ground, exhaustion warring with thought. The cub curled against her knee, breathing quick, twitching with dreams only beasts understand. Ryder sat apart, back to the wall, rifle across his lap. The weight of silence pressed heavier in the canyon. He could almost hear the future advancing, footsteps in the distance, blades drawn. He had lived long enough to recognize the shape of encirclement. Night deepened, stars scattered above like broken glass. The cub stirred, ears flicking, before a growl rumbled low in its throat. Ryder's body stiffened in instant response. He caught the faint tremor of stone, the whisper of movement. Shadows slithered along the ridge above. Raiders. The attack came sudden as a storm. Arrows tipped with plasma whistled into the hollow. Sun yelped and flattened himself to the dirt. Lyra dragged the cub against her chest, shielding it with her body. Ryder fired upward, muzzle flash splitting darkness, each shot precise, economical. Stone shards rained down as raiders descended with blades gleaming in starlight. The fight was savage and close. A blade scraped Ryder's arm, slicing cloth, kissing flesh. He answered with steel but stock to skull, blood spraying across rock. Lyra, refusing to cower, swung her satchel with surprising force, cracking a raider's mask and sending him tumbling. The cub, small but feral, latched onto another's ankle, refusing to release even as the raider shrieked and kicked. Sun scrambled in panic, eyes wide as raiders closed in. Then something in him snapped. With trembling hands, he pulled the hidden pistol from beneath his cloak and fired wild, the shot clumsy, but enough to drop a raider mid-leap. His breathing came ragged, disbelief etched on his face. For once, his choice was not measured by profit. The canyon echoed with screams, shots, snarls, and the crash of bodies. Dust filled every breath. Ryder's movements blurred into instinct, parry and strike, fire and reload. Yet even he felt the weight of numbers pressing. HFY had not underestimated twice. Then came the roar of engines overhead, and light seared the canyon floor. Raider transports descended, their spotlights flooding stone with harsh brilliance. Shadows vanished. Dozens more soldiers poured from ramps, armored and armed, blades glinting like teeth in the night. For the first time, Ryder's jaw tightened in something near despair. His rifle clicked empty. Lyra clutched the cub tighter, her eyes darting with desperate calculation. Sun stood trembling, pistol empty, courage brittle as glass. And then, in the silence between heartbeats, the cub climbed from Lyra's arms. Bloodied, breathing ragged, it stood alone before the advancing horde. Its growl rose, deep and unyielding, echoing off stone. It did not know the scale of its enemy. It only knew refusal. The raiders hesitated. For one impossible moment, faced with something they had dismissed as small, they faltered. Their pride cracked again, more jagged than before. Ryder's hand closed around a fallen blade. Lyra's voice rose in a cry of defiance. Sen's eyes hardened as he lifted his pistol, empty but raised. Together they stood behind the cub, their shadows stretched long beneath the harsh light. The clash that followed was not a battle of strength, but of spirit. Steel rang, voices broke, the canyon shook with fury. By the end, bodies littered the stone, and the survivors staggered back, retreating once more into the night. The hollow stank of blood and smoke. Ryder stood unbowed, though his arm bled freely. Lyra sank against the wall, clutching the cub to her chest. Sun dropped his pistol, staring at his shaking hands as if they belonged to someone else. And you, witness to this struggle, must understand. Life does not wait for certainty, nor victory, nor the permission of the powerful. It demands only defiance, that when the world closes in, you rise, even broken, even small, and say with every breath, not yet. The canyon floor was still slick with blood when dawn rose pale and merciless. Ryder Cole leaned against the stone wall, his arm bound crudely with torn fabric. Every movement throbbed, but he refused to show weakness. Weakness was permission, and permission in a place like this was an invitation to die. The cub slept curled at his boots, its fur sticky with gore, its small body twitching with dreams no one could name. Dr. Lyra Vane sat cross-legged near the fireless ashes, her notebook open, though her pen barely moved. For once, words failed her. Sun Varlo hovered at the cave mouth, his eyes restless, as though expecting salvation to stride out of the desert. His pistol was gone, his hands empty, and yet he still flexed his fingers, as if reaching for choices that no longer existed. He had fired one bullet, chosen one side, and that single act bound him here. Traitors could break contracts, but they cannot break themselves. More will come, Lyra said quietly. Her voice was hoarse from smoke and shouting. They already have, Ryder replied. His gaze stayed on the horizon, where black dots swarmed faint against the sky. Ships, larger this time, not raiding bands but squadrons, commanded and organized. HFY himself would be there, because pride demanded the spectacle of his victory. Sun swallowed hard. You can't fight a war with 3 bodies and a beast. Ryder's expression barely shifted. We're not fighting a war. We're forcing them to choke on one. The cub stirred at his words, lifting its head, eyes gleaming amber in the dim light. Lyra reached to steady it, and for the first time the creature didn't resist. It leaned into her hand, the faintest vibration of a purr thrumming beneath its ribs. A bond was solidifying, not tamed, but chosen. By midday, the ships darkened the canyon with shadow. HFY descended at the head of his warriors, robes trailing like a king, his armor etched in symbols of triumph. He strode to the hollow's mouth and called out, his voice amplified by alien tech until it rolled like thunder. Ryder Cole, he declared, savoring the name as if it were already engraved on a tomb. You are surrounded. Your cub is mine. Step forward, kneel, and I may let your species die quietly. The silence that followed was a living thing. Dust swirled, dry and bitter. Lyra's heart hammered, but her eyes flicked to Ryder, waiting for his cue. Sun shifted, mouth opening to bargain, then closing again when Ryder's glance cut him silent. Ryder stepped forward. No theatrics, no pretense, just the steady gait of a man who had lived with death long enough to treat it as a companion. He stopped just beyond the shadow line, his rifle hanging loose at his side, barrel scorched and nearly useless. You came all this way, Ryder said, his voice flat, for pride. HFY sneered. For justice. For order. For the natural hierarchy. Hierarchy. Ryder's eyes narrowed. One lost his fingers, another his jaw. The rest lost what was most precious, pride. The wounds to honor cut deeper than blood. That's what your hierarchy is worth. The raiders hissed, shifting uneasily. Their leader's jaw stiffened, the cracks in his authority widening for all to see. Pride was a fragile throne. The cub slipped between Ryder's boots, fur bristling, its growl rising. The sound was absurdly small against the army arrayed above, and yet it carried a weight that silenced whispers. Something in the creature's stance, its refusal to bow, its tiny, stubborn frame, unsettled even armored killers. Lyra stepped forward then, standing at Ryder's side. She did not raise a weapon, only her voice, sharp and clear. You think size defines survival. You think numbers ensure victory. You misunderstand both biology and history. The smallest organism can fell empires. The weakest body can unmake kings. HFY's sneer faltered. His gaze flicked to his soldiers, reading the cracks, sensing the shift. Doubt was poison, and doubt now coursed through his ranks. He raised a hand, desperate to reassert control. Ryder seized the moment. Look at your leader, he called, turning his voice to the crowd. He promised you trophies. Instead, you were scars. He promised easy prey. Instead, you bled in the dirt. How many more of you will he throw away so he can patch his pride? The canyon vibrated with silence again, heavier this time. Some raiders shifted their grips uneasily. Others avoided HFY's eyes. Authority cracked not with noise, but with hesitation. HFY roared, desperate, and signaled the charge. Dozens of raiders surged forward, blades gleaming, battle cries echoing. The air itself seemed to split with violence. Ryder raised his rifle though it was near spent. Lyra braced herself, stone in her fist. San, trembling, snatched up a fallen weapon, eyes wide with terror, but lit with something fiercer than greed. And the cub hurled itself forward, a streak of teeth and fury, too small to matter, too stubborn to yield. The first wave hit like a storm. Ryder fought with brutal efficiency, each strike fueled not by pride but necessity. Blood slicked his hands, sweat burned his eyes, yet he moved with relentless precision. Lyra ducked and struck, a scientist wielding desperation like science itself. Practical, sharp, effective. Sin's blows were clumsy, but every strike he landed was a betrayal of the coward he had been. The cub became chaos incarnate. It sank teeth into tendons, clawed eyes, slipped beneath armor gaps. Warriors toppled screaming. Not because of the wounds, but because of the shame. Mighty predators undone by a creature they had called insignificant. Then the moment came. HFY himself stepped forward, blade gleaming, eyes blazing. He sought not victory but spectacle, to reclaim what humiliation had stolen. He lunged at Ryder with the strength of command behind his strike. Ryder parried, but the force drove him to his knees. The blade cut deep across his shoulder, blood spraying. Lyra screamed his name. Sun fired wildly, but HFY loomed, pressing advantage. And then the cub struck. It launched from the ground, a snarl tearing the silence, jaws locking onto HFY's face. Armor did not matter. Status did not matter. Pride did not matter. The alien leader staggered, shrieking, blade clattering to the stone as blood poured down his chest. The sight shattered his army. Raiders faltered, some dropping weapons, others fleeing into the shadows. No one wanted to follow a leader who could be unmade by something so small. HFY fell, thrashing, pride bleeding out with his lifeblood. The cub released only when the alien lay still, then turned, panting, eyes blazing, its tiny chest heaving like a drumbeat of defiance. Silence followed, vast and absolute. The canyon walls seemed to breathe. Ryder staggered upright, one hand pressing his wound, the other resting briefly on the cub's head. Lyra's tears caught the starlight as she steadied him. Sin stared at the fallen leader, disbelief hollowing him out, but something new burning faint behind his eyes. They were alive, not because of strength, not because of numbers, but because they refused to kneel. And you, listening now, should understand this. Greatness is not written in size, nor carved in titles, nor shouted from thrones. It is whispered in the stubborn heartbeat that refuses silence, the fragile hand that holds fast, the creature that refuses to yield though the world calls it small. In defiance, life finds its shape. In resistance, dignity is born. And sometimes, the smallest refusal can break the mightiest chain.